only squatters you want on your land are the people that use your toilet. So that's all it is. It's as simple as that. And that's the nice thing about dealing with nature. Once you understand how nature works, you can actually you adapt yourself into nature again. You know, originally we were all part of nature, we still are nature, but we use nature to our benefit. They have a push button toilet. One pedestal uses 30,000 litres of water. Well, this is my worm composting toilet. It kind of looks nice from the outside here, and it's kind of even nicer on the inside. It's quite a simple system. It just relies on the basic principle that everything will compost if we just give it the right balance of nutrients to be able to do that. And you need a carbon to nitrogen ratio of around about 30:1. So human manure is quite high in nitrogen, and for that you need a bit of carbon. If you just leave all that waste in a heap, it won't break down. But if you were to add more extra carbon to it, it will start to break down. So roughly, when you go to the toilet, say to do a fecal deposit and a urine deposit, that will equate to about, if you just grabbed a handful of sawdust, of good quality sawdust that hasn't been treated with anything, it's just raw sawdust, and dump that on top, that puts the balance of carbon to nitrogen about right. And that will then break down. It'll start a composting process over time. That'll break down. But what I like to also do to that, to augment that, I actually like to add worms as well, introduce worms into the mix as well, because worms are really good at accelerating compost breaking down. So it's another food source for them. So they are quite happy eating. They're just normal. They're what they call tiger worms. They're a specific composting worm, and you'll find them on the floor of rainforests and stuff like that. So if you're not sure where to get them, you can always go out into the wild and catch them on a rainforest floor. And they're the ones we use. They're not the garden worms that you see in the garden, the big long tall ones that you can use for fishing and stuff like that. They're the ones that are really quite small and they're tiny, but we'll see some of those later. The nice thing about this system is that if it's very self-regulating. If you, every time you go to the toilet, just use a handful of good sawdust and sprinkle it over the top of your deposit. And if after, say, a couple of weeks you notice it starts to smell a bit like, oh gee, the toilet's starting to smell off, or it smells a bit uriny or a bit fecally, then what you can do is that's an indication that the toilet is out of balance. In other words, there's too much nitrogen and not enough carbon. So the way to bring that back into balance is the next 2 or 3 times when you go to the toilet, just use 2 handfuls of sawdust. And that will then bring it back into balance over a course of 2 or 3 days. Because it's the carbon that really soaks up that excess nitrogen. And your urine is quite high in nitrogen, believe it or not. So like weeing on your plants and stuff is quite good because it's high in nitrogen. So that's about as simple and about as basic the toilet is. Not much really goes on. There's not a lot of what they call leachate, which is like fluid flows out of the toilet. So there's no, despite how much urine you put into it, and fecal matter that goes in there, with the dry sawdust that seems to soak it up. So there's a pretty good balance with that. So realistically, I have my toilet sits in a little bund or like a little container of concrete with a little drain out the bottom. And that goes to a rubble drain that's underground just to sort of tidy that up. But my one actually doesn't even have a functioning one of those, and it just actually functions quite well without it. But I do need to reinstate it for the council. Anyway, so if you'd like to come inside longer, and we'll just have a quick sticky beak at the top end up here where the business goes on, and then I'll take you downstairs and we can have a look at what's going on underneath. So it gets a bit tight in here. So what we've got is a pretty basic pedestal and just a toilet, and that's really all it is. It's just a small little room. This is a bucket with sawdust. At the moment it's full of ants, but there's one. But that's okay. So it's just a bucket of sawdust, and that's a little bit damp. A little bit drier would be better, but that's okay. So I've got ants in here at the moment. They've been nesting in the sawdust, but that's okay, I don't care. So that lives there. One of the most important things you should do for this system is try and keep it vermin proof. You don't want things getting in there, and in particular we have a fly that gets here called a soldier fly. And a soldier fly is quite a long, skinny one, and they're okay. I mean, they're quite okay. What they do though is they'll eat all the fecal matter out, and what that tends to then do is throw the balance of carbon to nitrogen ratio out. So then we end up with too much carbon and not enough nitrogen, and proper composting doesn't go ahead. So they'll turn into little maggots, and those little maggots will then eat all that sort of fecal matter. But that's okay, because ultimately we want to get rid of it. But what I'm more interested in is actually the compost itself, and because I find that a really good nutrient that I can then use on my fruit trees later. So that's what this whole system is really about, generating resources and using that resource for better to grow foods and for human consumption later. I don't use it in the vegetable garden. I just like to put a plant between us and the food that we eat. And if I use this stuff in the vegetable garden, I'm sure it's totally fine. It's actually amazing compost. I'll show you later. But by putting it at the roots of a fruit plant, and like a tree or something like that, then we eat the fruit up there. There's a distance between the two, so there's no contamination of E. coli, which everyone's a bit paranoid about these days, but it's not really an issue. I can quite comfortably use it in the garden. Just one thing I forgot to mention though is I sort of think for composting to actually happen successfully, you needed things to be aerated nicely. And we'll talk about the aeration a little later as well in the bins when I show you one of those. But the toilet lid here has a few holes drilled in the top, and it's got a little grill on the top there as well. On the underside I turned it into a bit of a skull because I just can't help myself. But the idea for that is that I've actually got a fan running on the roof, and you'll see the pipes later, but they suck air down through this lid. Oh, yeah, I can feel it going through. So it's sucking air down through there, out and up a vent pipe up the outside, and that way it keeps things flowing, air flowing. That little fan I've got is a little solar panel that I managed to scrounge from somewhere. So whenever the sun's out, this is sucking air through the system. So it's a nice way to aerate the system as well, just an auxiliary way. I don't rely on that permanently. Well, permanently I do, but I don't rely on that. It's just a nice little thing to do, I thought at the time, just to try and encourage more composting process breakdown of fecal matter.
And I don't smell anything. Like it smells.
No, there's no smell at all.
Smells beautiful.
There's no smell at all. I mean, admittedly, this is a very open, sort of airy sort of scenario, but there's no smell whatsoever. And if there is a smell, that's when you know that something's out of balance. And that's when you have to and the simple solution is just add a bit more sawdust. So that's all it is. It's as simple as that. And that's the nice thing about dealing with nature. Once you understand how nature works, you can actually you adapt yourself into nature again. You know, originally we were all part of nature, we still are nature, but we use nature to our benefit.
How about the toilet paper? Can you throw the toilet paper in there?
Yeah, toilet paper's fine. The things that we don't throw down there are like tampons and plastics and things like that, because they won't compost. So just anything that's compostable, that all goes in, because toilet paper is just like sawdust, it's just carbon. And carbon is necessary for the breakdown process. So if we go outside now, well, I'll show you, but basically it's just this frame sitting here with this lid sitting on top of, I've got two buckets joined. I cut the bottoms out of the buckets and join them end to end, and that goes straight into the wheelie bin. And it's just literally a long drop toilet, but shorter drop.
All right, let's take a look at downstairs.
Yeah, sure, let's go. Okay, so we're around the back of the toilet here, and as you can see, it's really just a council wheelie bin. And what I've done is I've cut a hole in the top, and the chute just drops straight into there. So that pedestal sits directly above that. The seat's there, and it's just a tube that comes down and into this bin. Nice thing about these is they're quite mobile with the wheels. You can move them quite easily. They're plastic, so they don't degrade too well. Around the side here, you can see the pipes coming out the side here. I have a vent coming out there, and this goes up to a vent stack on the roof. And in this little section here is a removable. In this little section here is a removable part that has got the fan in it, and I can hear that turning now. I can hear it whirring around. That's the fan out of a computer. This all just comes apart. When I want to pull it apart, I just pull that off. I unscrew it here, and that drops out. That drops away so that leaves that, so that then can be able to be moved out. This stick here, it hangs outside the door. This is quite an interesting stick. We call it a shit stirrer, because one of the problems we have with composting toilets is because we're pooing in the middle all the time, we end up with a big mound like this.
Yeah, I see.
So the mound comes right up to the top very quickly. So what we have to do is just
Stir the shit up.
stir the shit up. Just move it to the side. So we make it flat again. So we have to do that several times during the process. But that's all right. That's all we use that for.
And you do that from the inside?
From the inside. So
from the toilet seat?
From the toilet seat. So you open the toilet seat, put your hand out the window, grab the stick, pull it up, and just move it across like that, stir it around and make it sort of hollow almost in the middle, pull it out, just shake it all the shit off, and then just put it back outside, and that's where that lives. So that's another invention.
Shit stirrer.
Shit stirrer. I suppose the next thing you really need to see is this is the kind of the external workings of this. I'm standing here. This is where the toilet, there's a tiny little hole in the bottom of this barrel for any excess moisture to come out. And the excess moisture comes out, but look, that's how much excess moisture is coming out.
Nothing almost.
See how dry that is?
Yep.
There's nothing really there. You can see a little bit of an overflow slurry there. This is a bunded area, but there's just nothing really getting out of there. If Longo, you want to come up here later and just have a sticky beat, you can see the two buckets that are just joined lid to lid, and then I cut the bottoms out of each end, and that's it. That's all I've got for a chute. That was as simple as all they are, just 15 litre buckets, and I siliconed them together in the middle with and then put a bit of masking tape around them. That's all I did, and that was my tube. I found that was the easiest way to find a tube. These are a rubbish tin. I bought 6 of these bins for 5 of these bins for $200 second hand. They're second hand Tweedshire Council rubbish tins that they, for whatever reason, didn't want them, and I got them for $200.
So once they are full, you wheel
Once
them
they're
out?
full, yeah, so once they're full, I pull the seat, the lid upstairs, the lid up top is removable. That whole thing just lifts off. Actually, we'll probably go back upstairs later and have a look, and I'll show you how easy it all pulls apart. You'll go, wow, okay. And that'll show the internal workings a bit better. So that lid comes off, and then I pull the tube out, and then I can remove the bin. And I pull this one off the side, so then I've just got a bin freestanding, and then I just wheel it out. The lid comes off, that just pulls off, and off comes the lid. And then I put it over here to the side. And this is really quite interesting over here. This is where I keep all my bins when they've been finished. So this is where these bins are at various stages of decomposing. I've got them lettered. I didn't have numbers, I only had letters. And that one up there is N, O, P, Q, R. So N is the latest one, and the next one after N comes O. So this will be the next bin that goes in. Then this bin, and this bin, then this bin. And this bin here is the latest bin that came out. And this bin has probably been here for maybe 6 months from where it was before. And it's been there 6 months, and it's growing out tomatoes. already.
And this one has been here for?
So this bin's been here for about 14 months, and in my opinion it's fully composted. Now, first thing we'll notice here is you see these tubes in the corner.
Yes.
These are for aeration. Once again, this is actually sitting in the right angle. So this has this round the side here. This is where that little vent tube comes down from the roof, and that sucks the air through here. These are aerated vents that I've made down the side, and they're really simple. They're just the same pipe, PVC pipe, cut in half, and then with holes drilled in it. And the bins themselves have a false floor in the bottom, so that there's aeration underneath the bins as well. Now this is what it breaks down to. This is...
So this now is pretty much sawdust.
No, this is soil. This has gone from sawdust to soil.
So you change it now from sawdust to soil.
Oh, yep.
How?
Because that's what composting does. And you smell that, Longo.
Smells earth.
It smells like earth.
Yeah.
That's compost.
So all the poo is now entirely 100% gone.
All gone, all composted down. This is a little bit on the dry side. The worms have been here, they've gone. There's a worm there, look. Tiny little worm.
Yep.
These are all free. If I dig around, I can probably get some more worms out. It's a little bit compacted because it's just starting to dry out a bit too much. But that is all beautifully composted.
Very good gardening dirt.
Exactly. So that's been there.
14 months.
14 months. This
Okay.
one will have been here for probably probably about 4 months less, and you can see the
Way
worms.
more worms.
Way
Yes.
more worms. See there, it's a little bit more active with the worms. When the worms go, that's a good sign that they've done their job. There's nothing left for the worms to eat, and all
they
you've got
just-
left is just humus. And so what you've got is worms. They excrete humic acid is one of the things they eat, and that's something that plants really love. Makes them really, really nutritious. So that one's 14 months. That one's probably 3 months. 3 months later. 3 months later. So we've got around about a 12-month supply of bins. There's 2 to 3 of us that live in the house, and we go through a bin every 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so and how full does the bin?
That bin there is quite full, and we fill them up to around about this level.
So quite full.
Yep, just below this is where I roughly do it. Otherwise it starts spilling out the side.
Full of layers and layers of poo and
Poo.
sawdust. Poo
That's all.
and sawdust.
And about halfway up I'll throw another handful of worms in.
Okay,
And I just get those out of my worm farm.
okay.
And that's really it, Longo. And as you can see, I mean, this is still really good for producing crops, you know what I mean? These are just growing out of our poo. We don't plant them, they just come up.
The tomatoes just come up.
Yep.
From what you ate.
From what we ate, yeah. That looks like the crows have been at it, but that'd be alright to eat.
That's
Yeah, they
perfect.
just grow out of there all the time. So, and that's really the key to this. The system is having 4 or 5 containers that you can swap in and out. Having them aerated nicely like this. These all have their little holes. We'll go around the back here and you can see the hole. This is what the lid looks like, by the way. Lid looks like that.
Yep, I see it.
And these just click in and out. I don't push these in really all the way. I just push them in a little way so you can just change them. Pull that like that and the lid will come off. And just swap the lids over. So you only need to cut 1 or 2 of these. And then that tube now sits through the middle of that.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as it goes. The nice thing about the system is it's really simple. So this one here, oh okay, so what's happening here, if we have a look down here, what's happening here, so these roots,
Yep.
this is where the leachate, these are my 2 holes that I have, these are the only 2 holes in the whole system, and this is where the leachate was coming out. This is why it's really dry in there, because what's happened is the tree that's sitting under have found the source of food and they've grown up into there and they're starting to eat all the food out. They're taking all the compost.
I see.
So the trees
yep.
have found it, yeah? So they've just found where the good tucker's coming from.
Yeah, it's been sitting here for 14 months.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's incredible, man.
So that's the
cycle.
2 little holes. So when we saw that over there, when you saw a little dark patch over there, that's all that is there. That's all it is.
The excess moist.
Yep. Actually, that is camphor laurel.
Kill it.
Camphor laurel trees. Kill it. Yeah. That's what that is. Their roots go everywhere. They're amazing. I can get them up in the garden.
Okay, so how full do you reckon that one is now?
That one's really full.
That one's really full. So if you take that one out, pretty much poo and sawdust.
Yep.
And then that one goes straight here, fully opened.
Yep. What I do with them now, when I pull them out of there, they'll be quite full, and they'll be live turds,
Live
and turds and toilet paper and stuff. So what I usually do is I go around and see. I just go out to the paddock over here, for example.
And get some grass.
And I'll just grab this, and I'll just put that
On top of
On
the
top.
live turd.
Yep. And what I will do is with say this is a full bin. I usually keep them full with sawdust and soil in the bottom, and then when I'm ready to change them over, I'll pull this one out of the spot. I'll put that bin in this spot. Then I'll dig some of this dirt with the worm eggs on top.
Put it on the
Spread
top.
it on the top. Then I'll put that on top. Lots more, of course. And then I'll just shut the lid on it.
And you close the lid.
Just shut the lid for about a month or two.
And then you can reopen.
Then I'll just open it up and just let the atmosphere take care.
Wow.
And that's the system really. It's as I say, it's a very natural system, and I want to use nature to let nature do the work rather than we have to do too much at all. And it takes 3 to 4 times a year. You just have to swap the canisters over, and now it takes me probably half an hour tops to do that.
That's an enormous amount of water that you're saving.
Oh, there's no water in the system. That's
Yeah,
right.
and not to mention sewage works that you're
Yep.
not getting involved
Yep.
in clogging the system.
There's no infrastructure really needed. I built this whole system, complete system. All that toilet and everything there is all built out of pallets and scrap tin. Second-hand windows, everything's all just second-hand stuff. I built that whole toilet there for probably $300. The most expensive part is buying the
wheelie bins.
The wheelie bins is the most expensive part, and over time it'll be the sawdust. The sawdust is around about $1 a bag,
Okay.
and you'll use about 1 bag every 6 months.
Still bargain.
So expensive. If you don't have sawdust, you could probably use paper. Shredded newspaper would do. Anything that's very carbony. So yeah, that's really it. So okay, what we're going to do now is I'm not going to do maintenance, but I'll show you the internal workings of the toilet, what's actually going on underneath this pedestal. So I'll just remove a few things. This is just literally, I've got a screw in here that I just take out. There's that one. And another screw here. Lifts up. And out. So that is our toilet.
Yeah, I can see live turds in there.
You can see live turds in there. So these are just 2 buckets, end to end, lip to lip, with the bottoms cut out of them. And you can see the system all up from on top. Now if you come over this side longer, you can see there's a bit more down the side. You get a better view of.
Oh yeah, just 2 buckets
2 buckets.
on top of the wheelie bin lid.
On the wheelie bin lid.
And that's it.
That's as simple as it is. All these timbers here are made from old pallets. This toilet seat I found on a rubbish heap. This is just literally like that. That's it is on the other side. These spiders, I don't even worry about them. They're all good. They're doing a job. They're catching mosquitoes for you.
That's it, no?
Yeah. This is my first toilet I've made like this. So this is a prototype.
How long have you had this toilet?
This one's been going 10.5 years now.
So imagine the amount of water you saved in 10.5.
Oh, look, just the average single pedestal uses 30,000 litres a year. It uses, on average, is 30,000 litres. I only have storage for water for 20,000.
Good thing you don't flush, otherwise you'd be running out of water.
I'd run out of water, yeah. As it is now, I've got a waste that is now turned into a resource, a valuable resource at that, you know. And it's what I love about this system. It's actually creating something better than just a waste product. Yeah. So basically, I'll sit here like this. I'm a squatter. Because that's how when you're squatting, your intestines are straight.
That's what they say. It's
Yeah,
the right position.
It's the right position. So I just sit here and just look at the view. Look at the chooks. Just enjoy myself.
Squatters.
Yeah, squatters, mate. We're the good kind of squatters. Only squatters you want on your land are people that use your toilet.